Hello, 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 and welcome back. Hey there, Simone. How you doing today?
Good. Good morning. How are you?
Doing well. We are back again this week, and we had already started our conversation before about teen girls, wellness, and
Mhm.
confidence. And I just want to start out with talking about the brunch that's happening in Chicago next week. It's the Confidence Mother Daughter Brunch. Are you excited or what about this brunch coming up?
Oh, I'm so excited. It's finally nice in Chicago. It was snowing 2 weeks ago, but now it's like 70 degrees. I got my dress, got my big hat. I'm so excited.
I can't wait to see that. A big hat, huh?
And my 4-inch heels. It's going to be amazing.
Yes, it is going to be so exciting. And one of the things I want to say for everyone who's joining in with us is that this brunch has been on my heart for so long now. It's been several years that this brunch has been on my heart because as we work with teen girls all the time, both of us, we see so much
Mhm.
in terms of everything that's happening with them social emotionally and how their confidence is waning. And I know that you see it, Simone, even,
Yeah.
in volleyball. So,
Oh, yeah. All the time. And not even just as like teen girls, just I feel like if you're not having the conversation when you're a teen, you just continue to struggle with it as you get older.
yeah, yeah, definitely
Mhm.
so, definitely so. So this brunch that's coming up, it's all about reconnecting with our teen
Mhm.
girls and really supporting them and, supporting their wellness as
Yeah.
well as their self-compassion. And
Mhm.
that's something that, I think is a big word and we're going to get into it more, but I want to just say to everyone the mother daughter brunch, the Confidence Mother Daughter Brunch is coming up next Saturday in Chicago. It's going to be an amazing time. And we want to invite you all. If you are a mom with a teen daughter, we want to invite you to come out. And we even have a little sweetener for you to come out.
Yes.
What is that sweetener, Simone?
Yes, so we are doing a giveaway. If you follow our Instagram and repost the flyer and tag 3 people, then you have the chance to win a free, pair ticket to the brunch, and so we will
Yeah.
announce that next Wednesday, April 19th. I
Yes,
also wanted to
absolutely.
share that this isn't just for, like, mothers and daughters, it's for aunt and their niece, grandma and granddaughter,
Mhm.
anyone you wanna share this moment with, because
Yeah.
it's gonna be fire.
It is. It is. We got so much planned, so many goodies. And so it's going to be just a great time all around. So we're just doing all this talking, and I want to introduce ourselves just briefly. I am Dr. Pamela Ellis, the education doctor. And Simone, who are you?
Yeah. I'm Simone Speech, and I'm one of the college counselors at Compass College Advisory. I'm also
Yeah.
a former professional volleyball player.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. And the thing that we, had started talking about was wellness and confidence in teen girls. And I had spoken just in terms of talking about the mother daughter brunch, this term self compassion, self
Mhm.
compassion. And so I would love for you to kick this conversation off, Simone, because for those of you who haven't heard yet, Simone is doing a special program
Mhm.
with girls who play volleyball. And wow, that's been such an awesome program. I remember you first talking about it, but when we've had conversations and you mentioned self-compassion, that really, stood out for me because I don't think we really know what that term means or how to define
Right,
it.
right, and
Yeah.
it's such a interesting topic because I feel like it gets overlooked all the time, and people
Yeah.
don't actually think about what it is, and so when I ask my kids, like, what it means and if they show themselves
Mhm.
self-compassion, they all kinda look at me like,
Yeah.
because I'm sure no one's ever asked them that question. It's not
Right.
it's not just like a casual conversation to have, even though it's
Yeah.
super important.
Yeah. And how do you think it's so important for them?
I think because, life throws so
Hmm.
many things at you, and especially as
Yeah.
women, I feel like we get 10 times as much thrown at us all the
Yeah.
time,
Hmm.
every day, especially with our
Yeah.
emotions or hormones or whatever's going on. And if you
Hmm.
don't have, if you haven't had the
Yeah.
practice of not being so hard or unforgiving on yourself, then as you get
Mm.
older, it's just more and more weight on your shoulders, you
Yeah.
know? Like, did
And
anyone ever have that
yeah.
conversation with you?
You know something? No. And I don't
Mhm.
think I've ever really talked about self-compassion until having a conversation with you.
Really?
And I know that, I mean, oh my goodness, that makes me woo. Yeah, because I don't even think I've talked about it with Vera Grace even.
Mm.
It just feels like a new term to me in so many
Mhm.
ways.
Yeah.
Um, and in the last several years, as a mom, I've talked about self care, and
Mhm.
especially after being divorced, I felt like self care was paramount, to
Yeah.
my own wellness. And so the notion of self compassion really hasn't come up much.
Right. And it's so funny because it was never like my parents never were like, "Oh, this is what
Mhm.
self-compassion was," but it was always I feel
Mm.
like they were always very self-compassionate with me and, like, trying to teach me
Yeah.
to be self-compassionate without necessarily saying what it was. And so I'd have moments where,
Hmm.
like, I'd freak out because of a test or I got a bad
Yeah.
grade, and, like, my parents would be like,
Mhm.
"Simone." They're like, "It's not the end of the world, like, you can't be so hard on
Yeah.
yourself, like, just do
Yeah.
this and it'll
Mhm.
be okay." And this was with everything, everything.
Yeah.
And, I noticed that
Hmm.
it's not always like that, and
Yeah.
it definitely comes from your environment and, like, who you surround
Mm.
yourself
Right.
with, um,
Mhm.
and then it wasn't until, my early 20s that I figured out that that's what it was, that's what self-compassion was, and it's a big
Right.
reason as to where my patience today comes from.
Mhm. Yeah, and as we're talking, I think part of it may be generational
Oh, for
because
sure.
my mom had me when she was 45 and she was part
Mhm.
of the silent generation who came through
Mhm.
the 29 crash. And
Mhm.
so she just really didn't talk about things like that.
Mhm.
And so it's not something that would have even come into my sphere of understanding
Right.
necessarily. And so that could drive it. And I think that that has, so many implications for how we mother
Mhm.
as well. And so if I hadn't seen it or discussed it with my own mother, then it's highly likely that I wouldn't talk about it with my daughter either.
Right. Right,
Yeah.
that's super interesting. I feel like that could be a whole other live
Yeah.
in itself. I could bring my mom on the show.
I
We could
know,
just
right?
see where the disconnect is. That's super
Yeah.
interesting because you had a lot of siblings too, right?
Yeah. I have
Yeah.
6 sisters and 2 brothers.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
mom was the baby of 11, so I know you guys are very similar in that way.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
and so wow, that's really interesting, Simone. What a
Mhm.
different I don't think we planned to talk about this
We did
when we were
it.
talking about this show. We really didn't at all. So yeah, you just touched a nerve when you asked
Sorry.
me about self-compassion.
Told you I was fired up today.
Yes. But tell me, when you're talking with the girls, they are what, ninth through 12th grade that
Mhm.
you're working with. What is it that you're saying to them around how they can practice it? Because you
Mhm.
mentioned that word practice, which I think is really important for thinking
Mhm.
about self compassion.
Right, and so in the lesson, we go through basically what it means and like the components of it, because you
Mhm.
have to really understand what it is and what it looks
Right.
like in different situations. And so
Mhm.
there are three main things that we talk on. So there's self-kindness versus self-judgment, common humanity versus isolation, and
Mhm.
mindfulness versus over-identification. And within
Hmm.
each of those, explaining what they
Mhm.
are and
Yeah.
how self-compassion looks like with each one of them. And so the biggest
Hmm.
one that I'll talk about right now
Right.
is the common humanity versus isolation. Because when
Hmm.
people are struggling or having a hard time, they tend to isolate themselves and they shut
Right.
themselves out and they're like,
Mm.
the world hates me, life sucks,
Mhm.
I'm
Yeah.
struggling, and they feel super isolated and alone. And so,
Mhm.
how do you get out of that hole and basically change your whole brain chemistry to make you realize that like it's not just you and you got to step outside of that and like talk about how you're feeling and
Hmm.
share your feelings, because you'll realize once you realize you're not
Right.
alone, then you're
Mhm.
like, oh, okay, like it's not just me,
Right.
other people feel this way,
Mhm.
like I can share my
Hmm.
pain and like move past it. um
You know, you talk about isolation in terms of when we withdraw ourselves, but
mhm,
what about in the case of a forced isolation? And I ask
mhm,
about that when we think about everything that's happened in the last 3 years, and a lot of
mhm,
what's come out of the CDC report that talks about this crisis with teen girls
mhm.
is that the anxiety and stress, those feelings of isolation that intensified during COVID. And so
Mhm.
that's, how do you what do you say when, part of that isolation, those fears and worries come from a time when they couldn't be around anyone else? And I know that's
Right.
kind of maybe a tough question to ask on the spot. But if you
No,
have any thoughts initially about it.
no, I think it's a great question. Like, when I was playing overseas, that
Mhm.
was my biggest struggle. I felt very isolated, even though I was,
Yeah.
I was playing volleyball and I was with my team. I still felt isolated because
Mm,
I wasn't with, loved ones or friends. I was with a lot of people who one didn't speak
right.
English and didn't know me or necessarily care to get to know me on that level, just because you
Right.
go to practice, you go home. They had
It's a
families to go home
job.
to, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
and you know, the way that I kind of pushed myself to get out of it was definitely reaching
Yeah.
out to people that I didn't necessarily know. And like, so for example,
Hmm.
other Americans were there, and so I would just text them,
Yeah.
be like, "Hey, like, I'm sorry, like, can we FaceTime, please?" And that's hard because a lot of people don't like to
Yeah.
step outside of their comfort zones.
Right.
Um, but even just like reading books, that was a big one too,
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
again, you have to like see it and like read it
Mm,
from, somebody you don't
yeah.
necessarily know, to be like, okay, like they're experiencing exactly what I'm feeling right now. Like, how did they
Mm,
get out of it? Like, what can I do? Maybe they
yeah.
did something that can help me too.
Right. Right. Oh, that's so good. So good.
Mhm.
So, for those of you who are just joining in, we've been having a great
Mhm.
conversation about self compassion, what that looks like, practice
Mhm.
of self compassion. And, a lot of these conversations, have been bubbling up to the surface because of everything that was released in the report from the CDC. And then also the work that we've been doing at Compass. And so,
Mhm.
Simone, with your program, and, I think it's interesting that, when you initiated your program with girls volleyball players, it was around the same time that we started talking about the confidence
Mhm.
brunch
Yeah.
and everything that's, leading up to that. And so before we sign off, I just want to invite everyone again to go to theconfidencebrunch.com. And if you are in anywhere within a 50-mile radius of Chicago. We want you to join in. And even if you're here with us on LinkedIn,
Mhm.
on Facebook or Instagram, Simone, tell them what the prize, what the fun is.
Yes, so we are doing a giveaway. You have to follow our Instagrams, compass underscore college underscore advisory and CCA Chicago. Repost the flyer and follow. I'm sorry, not follow us. Tag 3 people, and you
Yes.
can win free tickets to our brunch.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And is that only on Instagram?
No,
No.
LinkedIn and Facebook.
Wherever you are enjoying this video, we
Yes.
want you to tag 3 people, to share it,
Yes, and
and
follow us.
yes, and follow us. And we just look forward to seeing you next Saturday. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.